So, a few weeks ago, Football Manager 26 finally released after a 2-year wait, and for longtime fans of the series, the wait was unbearable with the franchise deciding to take its boldest step yet by moving to a whole new game engine and promising to give us better graphics and presentation while continuing to maintain the same gameplay that has kept Football Manager fans on board for decades. At least, that was the idea. The game came out as a mess riddled with bugs and a new UI that's been as divisive as the arguments between Messi and Ronaldo during its advanced access beta. The full release didn't have a day 1 patch to solve a lot of ongoing issues, and as of the time of this video, FN26 is still being worked on and gradually being patched on a weekly basis, with thousands of bugs having been reported on Sports Interactive's message boards. People are mostly not happy with the current state of this game. Thus, I decided to dive in and read some of the negative Football Manager 26 reviews on Steam, so that you don't have to. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to read some of the reviews and chime in with what I think of them. I will also be making fun of a couple of these, sometimes using really bad accents to do it. So, whether you agree or disagree, that's up to you. So, let's get started with some rapid-fire reviews. UI bad. Worse than its predecessor in almost every way. Unfinished game. This is the state I thought FM25 was in when it was cancelled. The worst version ever. It is not enjoyable to play. Incredibly disappointing. Miles out! This game single-handedly cured my FM addiction. Thank you, Sports Interactive. Well, we're certainly off to a stellar start. A lot of variations of a couple of these across the Steam reviews if you do want to see them for yourselves. And yes, the UI seems to be people's biggest problem overall if you ask them to point out a feature of the new game that they hate. However, we've got more ground to cover, so I'll move on to a few more detailed reviews. Football Manager for Dummies. Stripped back to bare bones. No immersion. Limited control over your club. Finances absolutely cooked, impossible not to run a deficit. A million glitches and bugs besides. Cannot recommend this to anyone. Having played FM for 2 decades, I can say this is the worst iteration ever. If you're on the fence, I would advise you to stick with FM24 or previous version. 3 out of 10. So you call it Football Manager for Dummies, but then promptly typed in that finances absolutely cooked, impossible not to run at a deficit. So, is it for dummies, or are you just bad at the game? Because that 100% sounds like a skill issue here that you're taking out in the review over it being an actual game issue. But I do hope you get that figured out if you pick up the game again in the next few weeks. We're just gonna move on to the next one. After a year of socializing, I'm ready to create Haramball 2.0 with the new tactical updates. I am very well aware that this is listed as a positive review for the game. But anybody whose initial intent for tactical creation is to create Haramball is a person that thrives on negativity. So they make this video on that basis alone. On to the next review then. The game is a total mess. They capped the FPS at 30 and 60. The UI looks like something straight out of a mobile game and it's exhausting to look at. There are countless bugs, progression issues, matches freezing while players keep moving, visual glitches, even players wearing the wrong team kits. Places you could reach in 2 to 3 clicks before now take 7 to 8, and you call that innovation. No, it's plain nonsense. If you play in the Turkish league, you might come across a 3rd division level player who feels like a mentally nerfed Kevin De Bruyne or Ederson's turtle version. Researchers say they're not doing it for money. Okay, but who's to say there isn't some kind of bias or outside influence when these player profiles are made? It really makes you wonder if that's why some of these ratings feel so off. Okay, the rest of the review, as you're gonna see on the screen over here, has the person going into their respective points on why they gave it the big old thumbs down. Now, I am in agreement on the basis that making certain options in-game take more clicks to find compared to FN24 is a really bad call and an atrocious bit of UI design on sports interactive side. But to have a go at the researchers for the game is where I feel where I need to draw the line. These are human beings at the end of the day. Bias can be a thing that exists, sure, but to act like they're just half-assing their jobs because you can't help yourself but to compare them to footballers playing in the English Premier League or Serie A in Italy, that's more so a you issue, and I think you should re-examine your priorities just a little bit off of that alone. Then again, this is also the same person saying the new graphics are like FM24 with extra brightness and saturation slapped on, while claiming to have the ultra settings on. So, I'm just gonna leave these screenshots here and let you compare for yourselves to see if this person is really onto something or if they're just vomiting word salad in bad faith. Anyways, we should move on to the next review. Shocked at how bad this game is. After 5 hours of gameplay, I am back to FN24. It's one thing to have some growing pains going to a new engine, but this is just bad. The endless list of important features removed, and the game is still buggy and slow? Considering Miles is out there hyping it up and so proud of it, we'll never buy another game as long as he has a job. Pathetic. All I'll say here is that if your loyalty to the franchise is dependent on whether Miles Jacobson stays on as the studio director at Sports Interactive or not, you're probably not going to be buying another Football Manager game for a few years. Because even with the snafus they've had over the past 2 years, the botched PR campaign tour with a lot of woe is me talk from Miles during the process of making this new game and such, I just don't think Sega are going to give him the boot. At least, not yet. But who knows, if FM27 next year turns out to be a bigger shit show than this one, you might get your wish. Anyways, see you next year. Time for our next review. Erased 20 years of what made FM great. UI is awful, features completely missing. FIFA is a better management game, and that's disgusting. Well, if there is one consistent thing across all these reviews, it is very much regarding the UI, which, yes, it took me a while to get used to, and I still have the odd frustrating moment when trying to find something in it being 4 to 6 clicks away compared to the 2 to 3 in previous FMs. But to go to the extent of calling FIFA, or, I'm sorry, EAFC as they like to be called nowadays, a better management game? That's the actual disgusting part of this whole review. You could have given me whatever scraps of FN25 that got thrown into the garbage when it was cancelled, and it still somehow played better than the continuous piles of shit that Electronic Arts has put out since they peaked with FIFA 17. Let me move on to the next review before I have to drag Diagonal in here to make my point for me. Play any other version ever made than this horrendous mess. Made for the TikTok doom scrolling generation and not for the loyal PC fans. You know, the people that have played this game for decades and kept their company alive. SI should be ashamed of themselves. Whoa. Hang on a second. Did you just really use the words TikTok doom scrolling generation to describe a video game, while also calling yourself a loyal PC fan? What's next? You're gonna tell me that you tried to play this on a 2010 laptop and got upset about your game crashing 20 times over because you can't do the 2D match engine watching anymore? Look, like what you like, dislike what you dislike. It's your money, and you have your right to write your review as you see fit. But I also have the right to look at this nonsense you've written without any other context than, it's crap because it's not for me, the PC gamer, and tell you to go back to your Championship Manager 0102 cave so that I never have to read anything you type out ever again.
These boomers!
Unlike this person, we're going to move on towards the future and with it to our next review. TLDR, if FM24 was 4 stars current ability, then FM26 is a 2-star current ability and 5-star potential ability. FM26 is a strange mix. Incredibly fun, yet frustratingly flawed. SI has missed the mark and focused on the wrong priorities for FM26. But there is clear potential, be it for FM26 or FM27. Presently, it is not something that can currently be a recommendation. A generous 5 out of 10, but with big potential if SI does the right things moving forward. Contrary to majority of current reviews, I personally am having a lot of fun and enjoying FM26. I've gotten used to the UI, in my opinion it's not as bad as many are screaming about, and have roughly figured out kinks and issues whilst finding ways to work around it. Overall, I am having fun. In possession, out of possession tactics is fantastic fun, transfer room is fantastic, match graphics are significantly better for FM standards. Having said that, I simply cannot recommend this game in its current state to others until SI resolves the critical bugs and errors that are written throughout. But I am definitely open to changing this opinion if updates are shipped quickly to improve the situation. If you are a diehard FM24 player, skipping another year may be a rational choice. On a personal level, I find it fun and I will continue playing FM26. I actually cannot believe this. A review with nuance to it. Nothing extreme, nothing that feels like they're joining a hate mob, and while this is the short version of it, the person in question actually went for all the good, the bad, and the god-awful in their opinion with it on a level of detail that I fully commend them on, and I am in agreement with a lot of the points there. Because yes, the learning curve is steep for the UI, and if you're someone whose only video game of any kind is just Football Manager, they admittedly did you all very dirty on that front. Even as someone who plays my fair share of video games, it definitely took me a while to adapt to the learning curve of the new UI, and I have had my frustrations with certain bits of data being gone, and also with not being able to examine highlights of things like specific passes or shots taken by players after each game. Something I tend to do to grab specific highlights or whatnot for my FMC videos. Although the hope is that Sports Interactive do manage to fix up issues and lingering bugs enough to meet expectations. Even if it is the hope that kills you. Speaking of things that won't kill me, let's go to our next review. If this is what it looks like after a year delay, what on earth did it look like a year ago, and what on earth did they do the entire extra year? Priority for getting the consolers has ruined the experience for the fanbase on PC. Seems the console experience is just as bad, to be honest. So many bad choices with the UI, and I blame Sega, to be honest. It reeks of a Sega mishandling of a franchise of which they have a proven track record.
How are you not dead? I have no idea!
If you try to please everyone, you satisfy no one. Been playing since 1993 and this is the worst one. Can't say fairer than that. Only recommend if you plan to stream or create content, but the casual player I cannot recommend. Fingers crossed modders can fix the issues, but they shouldn't have to. So, this review actually hits on a very interesting point about modders. Because even within the first week of the official release of the game, those folks have been very much on the ball in terms of some of the things that they're already doing to make the game more bearable for players who are just that upset with the UI, the new look, the regen faces, and everything else in between. It's also one of the reasons why I personally like the fact that Sports Interactive finally moved the game engine over to Unity, because it's a hell of a lot easier to mod compared to the in-house engine that they rolled with for the better part of a decade. Should they have to do it? No. But from personal experience, just about every game that finds its way into a niche with a dedicated fanbase will have its fair share of sickos who know code and want to make it better. Hell, Even if FM26 had somehow stuck the landing and been an incredible release from the jump, there'd be multiple modders looking at it and going, but we can make it better, and then going to town on it. It shouldn't be on modders to save a game from being a chaotic mess on its release. I agree with that. But I thank them for their efforts nonetheless. Also, I am very curious to know the specifics of the Sega and Sports Interactive relationship at this point. Clearly, having to cancel last year's edition of the game was not an easy choice and hurt both the publisher and the developer's pockets. Was it a situation where Sega demanded that they have an early Q3 release to make up for some of the profits previously lost? Or did SI just stubbornly decide on the date themselves while botching the rollout and release of the game? Maybe a bit of both?
Questions for later.
Granted, I do personally have a particular annoyance for these boomer types, but he did nail that the folks playing the console version are somehow having an even harder time than we are on PC. Here's hoping that they get taken care of in the same manner I've got to take care of reading this next review. Poor. I can't even play the game. Every few games it crashes and I have to restart. I have played this game for 15 years. This is by far the worst user interface and gameplay when it actually works. Don't waste your money. First, I'm pretty sure this specific game only came out like 3 weeks ago as of the time of this video, not 15 years ago, and that the word you're looking for here is advise, not advice. Minor bits aside, I do find this review a little bizarre on the basis that the person in question logged in 75 hours of playtime at this point with over 55 hours in the last 2 weeks. So, is the issue resolved that was causing them to not be able to play? Or are they still going through the same cycle like just someone that is doing the same thing and hoping for a different result? I guess we'll never know. Football Manager 2026. The spreadsheet that fights back. Do you enjoy lagging menus, pop-up panels that load slower than your 35-year-old center back, and buttons that move just as you're about to click them? Congratulations, you're already playing Football Manager 2026. I started my first save as Chelsea. By the time the tactics screen finished loading, my assistant manager had retired, my physio had read my memoir, and I'd aged 3 years in real life. You know what? Look, I love an attempt at comedy as much as the next person, but I'm not gonna read through the rest of this shit when this same prick over here is unironically handing out positive and glowing reviews to Assassin's Creed games, all while licking Ubisoft's ballsack at every turn like he's one of their paid playtesters. Oh, and by the way, the only reason we even hear about Ubisoft nowadays is whenever their ex-employees are producing Game of the Year contenders. Next! Miles told us in an interview that they couldn't release FM25 because we deserved a better, more finished game. 1 year later, they come up with this. I think we, as Football Manager players, have been an easy community to please. We've basically been playing the same game for years with a few yearly additions/tweaks. They've had more than 2 years to develop something. I'm just in disbelief. How can a gaming studio be so dysfunctional? I agree with others who say that the soul of the game is gone. It feels empty and not thought through at all. Right, the SI is a dysfunctional company review, which I can't entirely disagree with at this point, even if there's far too many people dropping reviews on games who have zero idea of what game development timeframes look like for normal companies, let alone the ones cranking out year-to-year releases. Hell, those yearly cycles we see with sports games releases across the board can be their own separate discussion topics on how detrimental they can be for the quality of a game's release. The soul of the game itself is something I'd argue is rather subjective, especially on something that is a yearly release. It is not the best game within the series by any stretch. It definitely ranks on the bottom half of the table if we had to rank it, but I personally don't think it's as much of a mess as Championship Manager 4 was back in the day. A game that also had delays and got released as a buggy mess before patches had to come in to get it fixed multiple times into something that was eventually playable and feasible for its paying customers. You know what? On second thought, the SI is a dysfunctional company narrative is only getting stronger with this argument. This fellow might be onto something here. Let's see if this next review is also onto something. I genuinely cannot comprehend how you've managed to fuck this game up so badly. You didn't meet expectations for FM25, so had extra time. You've well and truly fucked this. Game constantly crashes. I spent 90 minutes working on my tactics and backroom staff, usually due on a new save before continuing, and it's all gone because it crashes. My laptop is a brand new 32GB RAM with an incredibly high processor. Even when it's not crashing, there's far too much going on, too many widgets, too many bugs. Why the fuck can I not continue with the spacebar? No international management on a World Cup year, yet you've pushed for women's football, which nobody will play. I just cannot get over how you've had extra time and fucked this so much. I am so disappointed it's the last FM I'll be buying, and I've played this game since the first release. I've uninstalled it and am back on FM24, twats. I am somewhat surprised it took me reading through and picking out quite a few of these to see one with blatant misogyny being sprinkled all over it. Even with hitting the right mark about bugs in the game being an overall issue since the advanced access beta, the spacebar stuff's been patched at this point to where you can run through your messages and continue through the game. International management got announced a while ago as an eventual module. Not what I personally call an ideal solution to it not being there from the get-go, but it's at least getting added. And again, just really think that picking out women's football is an overall issue to the game itself makes you the kind of weirdo that women in your day-to-day life should go out of the way to avoid at any given turn. Call me a cynic, but I think this review is just grandstanding for those likes and wanting validation to see that they wrote a helpful review on Steam, and they'll be back by next November to complain about more women's league licenses or more leagues outside of England being added. Maybe this next review won't be as egregious as what I just had to read. Ultimate Soccer Manager 98 was better. Unbelievable. Okay, I found the person who needed to rig matches to win at that game and is mad about not having something like it in Football Manager. With that said, we're just gonna stick a fork in this and call it done. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.